everybody, I'm Dan LoAlbo. I'm with LoAlbo Enterprises. We are a national distributor for dump truck tarp systems, trailer tarp systems, and roll-off tarp systems. Today we're going to do a change out of a tarp on a Donovan high tower system on this roll-off truck. Now this system is a double leg system. There's also the Donovan single leg system, but either one, the procedure for replacing the tarp is exactly the same. So a couple tools that you're going to need to get this started will be a large clamp, preferably something 6-inch or larger, razor blade, sharp would be good, several zip ties, wire ties, and a ratchet with a 3/4 inch adapter. The process is going to be to remove the old tarp, install the new tarp, and then properly tension the roller bar so that the tarp deploys and retracts properly. So this is our high tower system, and I called it a double leg because the gantry has two posts on each side, kind of like a field goal post. The single leg would have one single leg in the center, but again, the roller head assembly is virtually the same. The process for replacing the tarp is the same. What I did here is I removed the pull bar, and we'll discuss the pull bar and the installation of the pull bar later, but I removed the pull bar and I just secured the tarp so that it can't be released on its own. So what I'm going to do now is pull this off. There's a lot of tension on there. I'm basically just going to let it go and let it unravel all the tension. So all the tension is now off, completely off the tarp. As I pull it out, tension will be replaced on there, but it'll be significantly less than when it's fully tensioned. So what I want to do now is pull this completely out. I'm going to cut off the tarp at the roller bar and then remove any remaining pieces of tarp. Okay. As you can see, we have the tarp pulled completely off of the roller bar. Now in this particular case, at some point somebody changed this tarp in the past and they did not install it as would normally be installed. And you can see that there are wire wrapped around the roller bar to hold the tarp in place. When we install it, we're going to utilize Donovan's method so it'll be installed properly. So what I'm going to do is just cut these off. And when I release the final strap, the roller bar is going to take off again because there is a little bit of tension on it, but it's not like it was when it was fully tensioned. And it looks far more dangerous than it is. Roller bar assembly, and right now there's absolutely no tension on it whatsoever. What we need to do prior to installing the new tarp, and this is our old tarp, so we cut this off completely. What we need to do prior to installing the new tarp is put tension on the roller bar. Now, Donovan, the manufacturer, suggests you put about 30 to 35 turns of tension on the roller bar prior to installing the new tarp. I've done enough of these to know that putting 35 turns by hand is somewhat difficult. So I shoot for about 25 to 30 if I can get there. And then I will use my C-clamp to secure the roller bar prior to installing the new tarp. The new tarp will be slid into the roller bar through this extruded groove in the roller bar. There'll be a plastic spline on the new tarp, which we'll show you, and we'll slide it in through this groove. You can see on the roller bar, in this case, it still has the information tag indicating to preload, you're going to roll it in the up direction, which is counterclockwise, because the tarp, when it's installed, it's going to roll underneath in a clockwise manner. And as you can see on here, it says rotate 35 turns in the directions of the arrow, but again, that's asking for a lot. So we're going to shoot for 25 to 30 turns, and we'll secure it with our C-clamp at that time. So when you get to the point where you're going to start pre-tensioning the roller bar, it always helps to have a helper so that you can both be putting the turns on the roller bar and then one person can hold it in place while the C-clamp is installed and securing the roller bar so that it doesn't release the pressure that you just put on the roller bar. So we're going to start making those turns now. By the way, it will be noisy. That's the internal components on the roller bar. It doesn't mean anything. It's just the spring tensioning inside. So we're going to count each time. Right there, I'll put the spring on. We're going to keep the extrusion at the top, so when we put the clamp on, it rolls back to about the center for us. Do you have it, Dave? Yes. I'm going to put it on here pretty tight, but not ridiculous, because I don't want to crush the roller bar. And we're going to let it ease back and lay against there. So there we have it. Now we got 26 turns on there, and it was getting pretty tight. And this is an older unit, which means the spring has fatigued the inside a little bit, and it was still very tight at 26 turns. So don't feel bad if you don't get to 30. Okay, so the next step is to install the new tarp. And we have the tarp somewhat laid out here. It's still bunched up. It's a little easier to take it up on top the truck if we keep it in a smaller position. This is our rear of the tarp, and you can see Donovan. So this is actually an OEM tarp. And what we'll do a little later is we'll be sliding the pull bar through the rear here, but we'll get to that in a bit. The front of the tarp, as I had mentioned, will have a plastic spline sewn through it. And I don't know if you can get a shot of that or not. And this spline will go through the extrusion in the roller bar. So the next step is to get it up on top of the truck, and we'll pull the tarp through. All right, so we have the tarp up on top of the truck here. Now, one thing I want to mention is, in this case, this roll-off truck has a can sitting on top of the framework. A lot of times when you're doing the install, a can may not be available, there may not be one on the truck, and this is making my life a little easier. So if you don't have the can, you may need to have a ladder on each side of the truck to work between, or you're standing on the framework of the truck, so it's a little bit higher. We also have the Donovan elevated just a little bit to make access somewhat easier. When this is in the fully down position, it's about 2 feet below where it stands right now. So we have our extrusion showing. We have our tarp up on top, and the next thing we're going to try and do is slide it through here. Now, it's not always easy to do. We're having a very cold day here in Virginia Beach. That makes the tarp stiff, so it's a little harder to work. The vinyl gets stiff. If it's a nice warm day, this is usually much more pliable and easier to install. If necessary, we may squirt some WD-40 into the extrusion to make the sliding a little bit easier. We're going to see how it goes without that first. So we're moving in pretty easy right now. Come across to this side, pull it right on in. Now the high-powered tarp, this tarp is 100 inches wide. Our roller bar is 96 inches wide. Donovan design, that's how it's set up. So the tarp will extend about 2 inches on each side of the roller bar. That's normal. We're not going to worry about that too much. Our next step is going to be to get the tarp kind of pulled out and squared to the high tower assembly. Then we're going to install the pull bar at the rear of the tarp. We're going to release the tension and let the tarp pull in. Then we're going to add the necessary full tension so that the system will work properly. Okay, so we have the tarp completely pulled square to the high tower assembly. You can see it's extremely long now. The high tower tarp, as I mentioned, is 100 inches wide. It's also 28 feet long, so you can cover 20, 30, or 40-yard cans with relative ease. This obviously is a shorter can, so we have certainly enough tarp for here. But what we're going to do next is install the pull bar. And this will go through the sleeve in the back of the tarp, which is right here. And the idea behind the pull bar, which is basically a composite bar with insulation foam wrapped around it, is so that the tarp, when you retract the tarp, it doesn't pull into the housing, it stops. The foam is thick enough that it'll stop the tarp from entering into the housing and releasing the tension. So we're simply going to install the pull bar by opening up the sleeve in the tarp and sliding it through. The pull bar is going to be shorter than the tarp, and that's okay because what we're going to do is actually use the zip ties that we showed earlier and close the ends of that sleeve so that the pull bar cannot come out. In order to close the ends of the loop, you do have to do something that you probably don't want to do, and that's you have to push a little slice through all portions of the tarp. And as you can see, I used my razor knife and I cut a little slice here. I pushed it through the back side as well, and then I placed the zip tie through both sides, and I'll secure the zip tie. But what I'm going to do first is cut my 3 or 4 slices so that I can put that number of zip ties in. A sharp knife really helps because this is pretty sharp, pretty strong material. So I'm pushing the whole way through. You can see the razor coming out on the other side. And I want to give myself enough cut so that I can get the zip tie through, hopefully with relative ease. So on this sleeve, I think I'm going to use 3 zip ties. So I have my 3 zip ties in place, and again, we are closing the end of the sleeve so that the pull bar and the foam does not slide out. So we'll close this end, we'll close that end, and then we'll begin tensioning the system. The next step will be to have the tarp begin to retract itself with the tension that we've put on the roller bar. We have the pull bar installed, we've closed up the ends, we have it laid out nice. So in this particular case, what we will have is an individual on one side of the truck with a ladder securing the roller bar, and somebody else on the other side taking the C-clamp off, and then we're going to have one of those individuals come back, hold this end of the tarp, and allow it to pull in slowly and square. Once we get as much tarp in based on the tension that's on the roller bar, we're going to go ahead and put the additional tension using an external ratchet that's on the assembly. We'll show you how to do that to put the final tension on the tarp system. Okay, so we've shifted gears a little bit. We put my video guy on that ladder, and we have another individual holding the tarp. We have Dave holding the tarp so that when I release the C-clamp, it doesn't come flying in. So I'm going to release the C-clamp, and Dave's going to allow it to pull in on its own. Starting to pick up here, and he can begin to let that pull itself in. So we put 25 turns on the roller bar, and it literally pulled the tarp the whole way in without any elevation in the high tower, which was pretty good. So what we're going to do now is put additional tension on the roller bar using the external ratchet assembly, which is right here on the end, if you can get a shot of that. And you can see this is a large, it's actually a 3/4 inch inside diameter, so that's why we need that 3/4 inch ratchet adjustment. So we're going to put more tension on here, and I think we had a shot of the inside here where you have the ratchet and paw on the inside. You see that in there? I don't know if you can get a shot of it or not.
I got one earlier.
Okay. On newer high towers, this ratchet and paw, which is located on the inside, is actually on the outside here, so it's much easier to add or deduct tension from the tarp. It made it a little bit tough with it on the inside and the width of the tarp. So I'm going to come around and we're going to put some tension on here. Then we're going to elevate the high tower and see if we have enough tension for the tarp to be pulled in when it's elevated. One other thing we're going to do before we actually elevate the high tower is this little sleeve. We will be putting a pull rope through here so that we can pull the tarp from the rear. We'll actually put a little leader line, about a 4-foot leader line, directly on the tarp, and that will stay permanently on the tarp. And then we'll have a longer pull rope that can be removed for storing behind the cab seat. So I have my 3/4 inch ratchet. I'm going to insert it into the assembly here. And what I'm going to do is, when we roll the bar counterclockwise to put tension on the spring, the internal spring. When we are working on the ratchet and paw here, we're actually going to be turning it clockwise to continue putting the tension on there. Now, Donovan said, or their requirement is no more than 50 total turns on the roller bar assembly. I don't think we'll get anywhere near there and have sufficient spring tension. So we put 25 or 26 turns on there. I just put a few more turns on before we started videoing again. And we're going to probably I'm going to do maybe 10 more total revolutions to see what we have. And I'm going to do it in like half-turn increments. I'm going to go 2, so that's 1 full turn. I'm going to finish out with about 10 more. Okay, so that's quite a bit of tension, I believe. It should be sufficient, but we can adjust if necessary. One thing I want to mention is this is an older unit, and what I did prior to working at this end is I took and sprayed some WD-40 on all the components here to loosen them up. They were very stiff, very tight. You want to make sure that the paw can move up and down and can lock into the ratchet, into the gear mechanism. So we're going to test it now and see what we have for a return on the tarp. This will be our first test, and hopefully we put enough tension on it to make it work without doing it again. But we have the tarp completely deployed. The high tower is raised, in this case, to its full elevation of 12 feet. So we're going to just kind of see if we can get this tarp to go back in. Now I got to try and get it over the can without the door open, so I'm going to have to kind of raise it up and get it to go up through. The tarp rolled in pretty well. Maybe it could use a turn or two. What I would do in this particular case is leave it as it is, and after use of a couple weeks or so, if the spring starts to fatigue a little bit, I'd add a couple turns. But as it stands right now, I'm not going to make any more adjustments. So our new high tower tarp is installed. It's ready to go. We have the full pull rope on here, so that when the load is on and full, we can pull it back. You can see it's not very difficult to pull back. And it pulls itself fully into the housing. That is how you install a Donovan high tower tarp.